Hi there, my name is Benjamin. I'm consultant with Camunda, and today's demo will be about robotic process automation and how you can integrate that with Camunda. If you need any more background information on the topic, I can recommend an excellent blog post by my colleague Mike. You can find it on our Camunda blog. And there he writes about what is RPA, how do you use it, why does it make sense to integrate it. So I'm going to demo you some really tiny example on how you could actually do this with Camunda, and I'm going to use UiPath as an RPA tool for that. So imagine you have the situation that you have a process, it could be an order process for this example here, and in this process you would first of all validate the order information. You can use any kind of services for that, and then you have two manual steps where someone needs to go into the CRM system, create a new customer, and then maybe also fill in some data in the ERP system and create an order there. From there, everything can be done automatically. So Camunda can take care of calling services that can process the order, can have incident handling like like you would normally do with BPM. And then you finally send out all the information or do whatever you think of. So this is not really the topic here. Thing is that these two steps here, these are both user tasks. So these require manual work, and of course this can take a while to be completed. Sometimes people are not available, sometimes they're on holiday. You could have errors just because you have to do a lot of copy and paste manual work just to get the data into the system. So that's something you might want to automate in the future. One way you could do this is to just replace the user task by a service task and then call some kind of API in the CRM system in order to create this customer. So you could think of something like this, where you actually use Camunda to call the CRM system, provide all the data that the CRM system needs, and create that order automatically, the customer in this case. Problem is that what if that CRM system is pretty old and doesn't provide any APIs? And that's something we want to address here with our RPA integration. So what if that doesn't actually work? Then you could decide to stick with the manual user task, or you could also integrate a so-called software robot that does the work for you. And the way this looks now is that you actually don't call the API directly, but you'd rather call the robot to do the work for you, to create the customer. And that robot now would, in the background, then take care of interacting with the CRM system just by pretending that this one is a human, and just by clicking the actual UI of the CRM system. And then once it's done, the robot will call Camunda, and everything can move on. So that's the overall idea. I'm going to show you a concrete implementation for this, and yeah, let's do this. So first of all, let's talk about the general setup a bit more. If we wanted to use UiPath, you can't actually call the robot directly. So what we are going to do is we are going to call a component of UiPath that's called Orchestrator. And that Orchestrator actually calls the robot. So our architecture will look a bit more like this. Actually, let me show you directly the process I'm going to automate. So this is actually the process we will be looking at. It's much more simplified than the one I just showed you, but basically does the same thing. So we start a process instance of Camunda. We generate some demo data that the robot can use, and then we call UiPath Orchestrator, like I said. And what we have to do is we have to add a new item to the so-called queue. And once we added this queue, one or multiple robots can work on that queue, do the actual work. So this robot then can call our CRM system or our legacy UI. And the robot then would tell us once he's finished. So we'll call an API in Camunda, and then we can do something with the output. So we could just continue with our normal process. So the overall robot integration would be these two steps here. We don't directly call robot, but we add a new queue item to Orchestrator. Orchestrator takes care of orchestrating all of the robots, and the robots call Camunda directly once they are finished with the work. The Camunda process is pretty simple. So if you're familiar with Camunda, that will be familiar to you. I just use Spring Boot for this project here. So I have an engine that is exactly the process I was just showing you. So now the machine is a bit slow. So that's the process I just showed you. And all we do here is we have a service task called add queue item. And that service task just sends a post request to UiPath in order to add this item to the queue. So what we do is we get some data from the process, and then we just send the post request to Orchestrator. Let me quickly show you the UiPath Orchestrator. So that's actually the system provided by UiPath. Orchestrator can run in the cloud. It can also run on premises. And that's just an example of how you can use those RPA products. But the idea is that you can have robots orchestrated by this component. I only have one right here. It's running on AWS. And this robot is controlled by Orchestrator. And you can create manual jobs, so you can manually start the robot and let them do something. You can also do scheduling, but you can also let the robot work on a queue. Let me show the queue. I have a Camunda demo queue here, and my Camunda process will add items to that queue. And then we will use a robot to work on this queue and give us feedback if it's finished. There's another component we need to use from UiPath, and that's called UiPath Studio. That's actually the designer, and that's the designer where you actually can program your robots. The robot process is clearly not modeled in BPM, but you can do all kinds of stuff with it. So normally it is something like a flowchart. You have all kinds of activities available from the palette. And let's say you wanted to read some kind of Excel file, then you would drag those activities and create some kind of flowchart using that studio. For example, I already have something in place. So that's our example process for getting the item from the queue. It will also open the legacy application. In our case, that's just a demo application here. And if it finds something on that queue, it will try to process that item. That means that the robot will actually try to use the UI, fill in some data, and retrieve some data from that UI and send that as a callback to Camunda. Trying to process the item is actually where the magic happens. So this is where we actually use these UI automation capabilities of UiPath. We let the robot actually click buttons and do stuff. And if everything went well, we end this activity and send the callback. Callback itself, again, is just a post request to Camunda's REST API. So that, again, is pretty easy to integrate here. So let me quickly demo how all of this plays together. There's one more component. Of course, this program needs to run somewhere. So actually, I also have the robot running on my machine. That little thing down here is the robot. You can see that the process that I just showed you is already deployed on that robot. And since this robot is connected to the orchestrator, like you can see here, Orchestrator can now tell that robot running on that machine that it needs to run this deployed process. So that's how it works. So if I now start a new process instance with Camunda, let me just quickly show you the process again here in the cockpit. If I run this, it will add a new queue item, and it will wait for the robot to finish the task. So if I start a new instance of that demo process, oops. If I start a new instance here and make up some business key, I don't know, my process 1, 2, 3. We started, and we can see in Camunda cockpit, just quickly refresh this view, that we have one running instance with the business key I just provided, waiting for the robot to finish the task. So we actually see that obviously we just added a new item to the queue, and it should be available in UiPath Orchestrator. So we go to UiPath Orchestrator and have a look into this queue. Then we will be able to see the item that needs to be processed by the robot. And we can actually see that there's one remaining item left. We can also have a look into the transactions and see that there's a new item. It has the same reference that I used for my business key, and this is waiting to be processed by a robot. Because now the robots could be scheduled to constantly work on this queue in order to slow things a bit down for the demo, so it is easier for you to follow. I will now trigger the process of the robot manually. Normally, I think you would have multiple instances of the robot running on this queue and fetching items all the time. So let me just start that robot manually so you can see that something happens. If I now just run this robot out of UiPath Studio, it will open the demo application. It will fill in some data without me doing anything. It will also close the application again. So we just executed this flow here. And of course, we also sent a callback to Camunda. So what we should be able to see now is that the item was processed successfully. So we can see the queue item was processed a few seconds ago by our robot. And we can also see in cockpit now that if I just click refresh again, here, that item obviously has been processed here. So we are now in the next step of our process. Can have a look into the instance and see that the app output here is now another variable in our process. So actually the robot sent us data back into the process, which is now available for further steps that need to be taken. Actually, what we did is we sent these 3 variables to the robot. These were the numbers that were filled in within the UI, and that one was the result of that UI interaction. And now we can also see in task list that we have a new task to do something with the app output. We can see the app output here again, and if we just claim and complete, then the whole process will be completed. Yeah, I think it makes sense to do it one more time so that you can see what actually happened. So first of all, we need to start a process instance with Camunda. We provided some kind of business key. Let's call it my second process instance, and then add just some random number. If we go back to cockpit, we see that we have another instance running. We also see that all of this data was provided by the fetch demo task. It was sent to the robot. We can now see that we have another queue item in Orchestrator, and now the robot can work on that item. Of course, it could also work on multiple items. We could think of something like a loop. Whenever some item is processed, get the next item. So we could actually have this robot iterate over the queue. In this case, we just run it once. We run the robot. We see that all those numbers get filled in into the UI. The robot clicks on accept, and then gets some data back from the UI. The queue item was successfully processed, and in cockpit we see that the process instance moved to the next step. So that's basically all you have to do. You have to send a request to UiPath Orchestrator, add a new item to the queue. One or multiple robots can then work on that queue and we'll send a callback back to Camunda so we can actually carry on with our process. So that's the basic example. Of course, there are many, many more things you could think of. So one thing that you could actually think of would be that you could now also add some error handling to the process. So what if the robot was not able to complete the task? Maybe the UI has changed and the robot cannot work on that UI anymore, or maybe the UI returns some kind of error. So in that case, you can also add some error handling here. Use again the normal Camunda and BPM capabilities to handle that error. Maybe also escalate this then to a real user so that this real user can also manually work on the task if the robot was not successfully. So this would be an example. You can also, of course, add some timeouts. So sometimes maybe the robot timed out, then you could also, let's say, check the queue and the status of the item. Something like this. So you could think of all kinds of things that you can now add to your process. The nice thing is that actually the robot just works the same way as any other service task. So from a Camunda perspective, integrating with an RPA solution is not different from integrating any other system. You can do it with asynchronous messages or REST calls like I did. You can also use Camunda's string task pattern if you like. So integrating an RPA system really is just using the normal, methods you can use to integrate any other service with Camunda. And on the RPA side, of course, you are free to choose any product you like. The only important thing is that it provides some APIs that you can actually interact with this robot, or in the case of UiPath, interact with this orchestrator. So again, if you're interested in the topic, have a look at Mike's blog post. I will provide some background information. I will always also provide a write-up of the demo, add this as another blog post to Camunda blog. And that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, and bye-bye.